New set means new cards, and that means I gotta go through them. So I went through earlier when the new cards dropped on the Facebook photo gallery of the Magic Puzzle Quest account. So yeah, if you guys aren't following Magic Puzzle Quest on Facebook, you can find their card galleries on the official page. So if you haven't done that yet, go ahead and find your way over there and check it out. So I went through and picked some of the notable cards. I'm sure I've missed a few here and there, but these are the ones that immediately I thought about possibly making a difference in the game. And I feel like the strength of this set is going to be mostly in the rare and up cards, but man, there are a lot of good ones. So I won't waste too much time. Let's just get right into it. We'll start with the commons and work our way up. All right, so let's do that. First one I want to start out with is a common called Mandible Justiciar, I think. And it's a white card, little 2/1 with lifelink, and it's an artifact for Phyrexian Cleric. And when another artifact card enters your play under your control, this creature gets +X/+X until end of turn. X is the number of this creature's reinforcements. So the reason this one stood out to me was because the +X/+X, and I love that in cards. Because I feel like there is a way to abuse this card, maybe break it a little. So, thing is, it does need to be reinforced beforehand, but I feel like there's going to be some ways of doing that. But it seems really easy to trigger when another artifact card enters your play under your control. So it's pretty easy to do that. There's a lot of artifact tokens in the game, so I feel like that's going to be the main way of doing it. But we'll get to another card that is going to help you do that even more later in the rare things. But yeah, I feel like all you need to do is reinforce this creature once and then just go to town creating artifact cards on the board. So this looks like it could be a fun little weenie card to mess around with. Next one, Vanish into Eternity, white spell card. Exile an opposing card with the greatest mana value. If the last card in your opponent's exile is a support card, you gain 9 mana. So it's just a nice solid removal, untargeted removal for white. I know it's 12 mana, but still, usually a lot of times the card that is giving you the most trouble in a match is the most expensive card on the board. Something like a Portal to Phyrexia or one with the multiverse or something like that. It's a Xander. Xander is going to be really good to exile with this card because you usually don't want to destroy him unless you can get away with it without destroying your own cards in the process. So that's why I like this card. And then it's got a nice little bonus, gaining 9 mana. In case you get rid of that Portal to Phyrexia, it's probably going to be the most expensive card on the board, and it's going to be a support. So gain 9 of the mana that you lost by filling up this card with mana. So I think that's pretty cool for a common. And I think those are all the commons I decided to spotlight here. So let's move on to the uncommons. Nahiri's Sacrifice. This isn't an amazing card or anything, but I think it's kind of interesting. Destroy your artifact support with the greatest shield. So, and then deal X damage to each opposing creature, and X is equal to that support shield. So depending on how many supports that shield has, or how many, so depending on how many shields that support has, this could be a really cheap board wipe for red against your opponent. So yeah, I feel like there's potential of using this card in a pretty effective way. Necrogen Communion. Target creature you control gains Toxic 2. It gains Enchanted. When this creature dies, return it to your hand. It gains full mana. So it's a pretty cheap way of bringing back a card to your hand and giving it full mana for stuff like, gosh, really anything that has an enter the board effect. And you get something that you gain an advantage for sacrificing one of your own creatures. So I think there's something there. The only thing about it is it gains Toxic too. And I believe that's the token that if you get 20 of them, you lose the game basically. And that's a new mechanic that we'll get into later. I'm not really going to spotlight mechanics in this video, just FYI. So if you're not yet familiar with the mechanics of the game, they spoiled that in the forum official thread. So go ahead and check that out if you need to know what Toxic does. But that's the only thing about this card. But if it dies, then I guess you lose the Toxic tokens that go along with it too. Or Toxic counters. So yeah. Necrosquito. This is an amazing card. It's a little expensive for what it is. But when this creature enters the battlefield, it gains oil counter 2. And at the beginning of your turn, this creature gets +X+X. Another +X+X. X is this creature's oil counter value. Or when a creature or artifact you control is destroyed or loses a reinforcement, this creature gains oil counter 1. This creature gains oil counter 1 for each of its reinforcements. So another thing that relies on reinforcements. So I feel like if you give this card a lot of oil counters, then it can get pretty decent size. So I think there's something there. It's a little expensive, but I thought it was a bit noteworthy. Bladehold Warwhip. So we finally get an artifact equipment that gives us double strike. So at the beginning of combat on your turn, equipment cards in your hand gain 2 mana and your first creature gains double strike until the beginning of your next turn. So that's awesome. Being able to put double strike on your first creature is always a great thing to have. Something that I really liked about Sword of the Realm when that was in standard. And then the nice bonus of having equipment cards in your hand, getting 2 mana at combat of every turn means you're going to be able to put more equipment on the board. So that's pretty cool, I thought. Rebel Salvo. The only reason I thought this card was noteworthy is because you can make a target opposing creature lose prevent damage. And it's only until end of turn, but you also get to deal 5 damage to that creature. So it's a great way for mono red to finally get rid of a Rem Colorless pretty easily, because it's not that strong of a creature. It usually, unless it's reinforced a bunch, it's going to die from that. So pretty cool. And then also reducing this card by X until end of turn. X is the total shield of equipment supports you control. So it goes together with that one. Shieldred's Edict. I thought this was a really nice, cheap removal spell for black. We haven't had one this effective at this mana cost in a while. If your opponent controls a Vanguard support, destroy an opposing Vanguard support, otherwise destroy the last opposing creature. So the only thing is, it's the last opposing creature, which is not always the one you want to destroy right away, but if they have a lot of cards giving you trouble on the board, then this is a great way of being able to destroy some of their creatures for a really low mana cost. Okay, this is one of the new lands, and I thought they're doing something pretty interesting with the lands. When this support enters the board, if you control no other land cards, convert 3 gems to black or red. That's already pretty cool, especially for somebody like Liliana of the Veil, because she gets the same amount of mana on black or red matches. And then at the beginning of your turn, if you control no other lands, convert 3 gems to black or red. Otherwise, convert 2 gems to black or red. So you get a little bonus for not having more lands on the board. And I don't play with a lot of lands typically, actually, so this might be really nice for me because I'm somebody who just doesn't play with a lot of lands, so this might be the only land that I have on the board, especially for a black or red deck. Mesmerizing Dose. This Card does a lot. Oh, this ended up being a comment, so I should have put it over there, but oh well. Mesmerizing Dose. It's a spell card. It's an aura, which is also noteworthy. But proliferate, escalate, and target creature gains stun counter 2. So you're doing triple duty with it. You can proliferate, which if you don't remember what that does, the coolest thing it does is that it makes your vanguards gain a shield, but it also reads a chapter of a saga, and it, I think, gives +1 to your buffed creatures. I don't remember exactly what it does, but escalate is one of those new things where it gives a Phyrexian toxic counter to your opponent. So that's going to help a lot with a few other cards that we're going to spotlight here. And then target creature gains stun counter 2, which is alright. Disable a creature for as long as the stun counters are there. So yeah, pretty nice for a common. Mythics. This is another card that's going to do well in mono color walker decks. At the beginning of your turn, if this support has 3 or more shield, convert 3 gems to your planeswalker colors. Otherwise, convert 2 to your planeswalker colors. And when you match the support gems, create a Phyrexian Might token, and this effect can trigger only once per turn. I'm not sure yet what the Phyrexian Might token is going to do. They don't usually let us know what the little clickable text is in these previews, so we'll just have to see what that is. I think it's probably just going to be some little like token creature or something, or token support that does something. But what I think is interesting is that, so this support, as long as you don't match it and make it lose shield, or your opponent does the same, you're getting 3 gems to your planeswalker colors. And as you know, in a mono color deck, that is pretty effective. Blade of Shared Souls. When this support enters the board, create a copy of target non-token creature into the battlefield under your control. So most of the time, I think people are going to want to do that against their opponent creatures. But I wonder what's going to happen if you target one of your own creatures. Does that just reinforce it? Or do you create like an extra creature on the board? I'm guessing it's just going to reinforce it. But still, every time the support enters the board, you can reinforce one of your creatures, and that can be pretty effective. And then you can also create another, I don't know, if you want like say your opponent's playing Faithbound Judge or Xander or Angel of Suffering, something like that you really want to have on your side. That's pretty awesome for a 12 mana support. That's an artifact equipment. Conduit of Worlds, another artifact. Mana Field. Pick one of the first 4 creature support cards from your graveyard. Fetch that card, and if it's a land card, it gains full mana. Otherwise, it gains half its mana. This effect can trigger only once per turn. Well, it's Mana Field, so it's already only going to trigger once per turn. So, yeah, that's cool. It's going to be good for decks that put a lot of things into their graveyard. It's going to be good for Ren and 7 for sure, because you're usually playing with lands and graveyard with them. So I feel like this is a natural fit for that deck, or for that Planeswalker. Dragonwing Glider. What I like about this one, your first creature gains +2/+2 and gains flying and haste until the beginning of your next turn. So that's going to do well with those creatures that have extra abilities when they get haste. So that's kind of nice. But, you know, always having haste on a creature is always helpful, I think. Encroaching Mycosynth. So this is a really interesting card to me. It's going to be one that I'm going to want to play around with a lot and see what I can do with it, because it basically turns all of your cards, like creatures and supports, into artifacts. And I feel like you can do a lot with your cards if they're all sharing that same subtype. So when And every time a card enters play under your control, it gains an artifact subtype as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see what people do with it. I, for one, definitely want to experiment with it. Ovika Enigma Goliath. So this is a 25 mana cost creature. So you're definitely going to want to find ways to put it on the board that don't involve sinking that much mana into it. But when you cast a spell or support card, create X Goblin tokens. Those creatures gain the Phyrexian subtype, and those creatures gain haste until end of turn. X is half that card's mana value rounded down. So I feel like that is just going to go way out of control, especially with like a Raw deck that's just going to be casting spell and support cards all the time. It's going to be kind of poor man's Mana Form Hellkite, but once Hellkite rotates out of standard, this might be something you replace it with. But it's pretty cool. It's got Ward, drain 13 mana from hand. And it's also, you can use it in blue decks, so that will help as well. To both get it out on the board and to cast other cards. So I feel like this is a pretty good fit for Raw. Phyrexian Arena. Support card, it's an enchantment. And at the beginning of your turn, draw a card, it gains 6 mana and you lose 3 life. I think that's just solid card draw for black. And gaining 6 mana is always nice as well on that card. So it's going to be a great way to fill your hand and fill it with mana. The Mycosynth Gardens. At the beginning of your turn, convert 2 gems to your Planeswalker's colors. And when you match the support gem, if you control another non-token artifact card, if the support is reinforced, the support loses a reinforcement. Then reinforce a non-token artifact you control at random. Otherwise, convert 2 gems to your Planeswalker's color. So if you match cards, the support, you have a chance of either converting 2 extra gems to your Planeswalker color. So that's going to be great for something like mono black, mono red, maybe even mono white. But also you can reinforce a non-token artifact card you control, so that's most likely going to be like Blade Coil Serpent. So I like this card. It's also a land. Now we're getting into the Mythics. And here's where things start to get really interesting. I think there were a lot of solid rares too, but my guess is this one's going to be a paid exclusive. It's Atraxa Grand Unifier. Creature, Phyrexian Angel, 4 colors. I don't know if I've seen that before, so it's only missing red. So when this creature enters the battlefield, fetch the first creature card from your library, fetch the first spell from your library, and fetch the first support from your library. So all 3 of your different things, and the last 3 cards in your hand gain half their mana. So that's going to be awesome for stuff like maybe Anhelo or any of those cards that enable ETB. So first thing you gotta do is get this card on the battlefield for yourself. And at 25 mana, it's expensive, but as we all know, there are different ways of getting creatures on the battlefield that don't involve paying the entire mana cost. And if all that wasn't enough, it's also got Vigilance, Death Touch, Flying, and Lifelink. So that's a really solid card, I think. Mondrak Glory Dominus. It's an 11 mana for 4/4, so it's not super powerful, but it's also not super expensive. The most important part of this is the first sentence there. When you create a token card under your control, reinforce it. And when you create a power... so yeah, that's really what I care about in this card, but also other little things. When you create a Power Stone token, create a Power Stone token. So just basically creating 2, but it can only trigger once per turn. Then activate 5 white. If this creature doesn't have prevent damage, destroy 2 artifact supports you control with the lowest mana value. So that's usually going to be token artifact support, such as Power Stone tokens. So then this creature gains prevent damage. So it's not like a blocker or has vigilance or anything. So the prevent damage is not going to do a ton for you, I don't think, in this instance. But you never know. And then if they're like gold tokens or something that you're destroying, that's going to give you extra mana. So I think it's a pretty cool card. Sulfim Mayhem Dominus. So there's another Dominus. When a spell you control deals damage to an opposing target, deal that much damage to that target. So that's very similar to Fire Servant. When another creature support you control deals non-combat damage to an opposing target for the first time during your turn, so there's a cap on that, but deal that much damage to that target. Still, that can be really cool. I don't think we have anything in standard that's going to be anything like Beacon Bolt, but that would be something that would be awesome to pair this card with, because it's going to do double damage for you. Activate 5 red. This creature doesn't have prevent damage. If you have 2 or more cards in your hand, discard those 2 cards, or discard 2 cards, and then this card gains prevent damage. So there's sounds like there's costs in giving prevent damage to these Dominus creatures, but I don't know if any of them have blocking capabilities, so I don't know how effective that's really going to be. But anyway, Staff of Completion. This is a pretty interesting card. So Mana Field. Increase this card's level by 1, pay X life, then perform each of the following actions numbered equal or less than this card's level. So it's going to take a while to get this card up to level 6, unless you like throw it in Casmina, which gives you levels. But let's talk about what it does. Number 2, you may destroy target creature you own. So there'll be some instances you want to do that. 3, convert 2 gems to your planeswalker's color. Not amazing, but it's something. Proliferate and escalate, which we realize is pretty cool. Draw a card, it gains X mana. And then 6, gain an extra swap. So that can come in pretty handy. And then, yeah, of course, X is equal to this card's level. Yeah, Casmina I'm looking at for getting that level up artificially. Because it's going to be right there. Hitting her 3rd is going to automatically get you from 1 to 6. Because it increases levels by 5. So something to think about there. Sword of Forge and Frontier. While this support is on the board, your first creature gets +8/+8, so that's already awesome. Looking at something like Faithbound Judge. And then when your first creature attacks, pick one of the first 2 cards from your library. Fetch that card. If that last card in your hand is a land card, it gains full mana, and otherwise it gains 5 mana. So I feel like that is awesome. You definitely can get some lands onto the board for cheap, and that's going to help out with a lot of cards. And then just getting more cards in your hand with mana is always going to help too. So really solid. So only thing is it costs 17 to get on the board, and then it's only got 2 shields, and it's also colorless, so a lot of people aren't. It's going to be a little more difficult than some other things to get on the board, being colorless, but it's an artifact, so there's a lot of ways to get artifacts on the board for cheaper as well. Zopandrel Hunger Dominus. So here's the green Dominus. This one is pretty awesome too. Well, this one actually has reach, so the prevent damage is gonna come in handy. So the first sentence here, it's kind of nuts. At the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you own until end of turn. So you get a built-in unnatural growth there. And then activate 5 green. If this creature doesn't have prevent damage, another target reinforced creature you control loses 2 reinforcements. If it can't, destroy that creature instead. Then this creature gains prevent damage. So since you could target, maybe you'll have something that gains you an advantage for destroying, such as like Suchi Cave Guard, for example. So yeah, I think this one is one of the more interesting Dominus cards. And yeah, I feel like it's probably going to get a decent amount of play. All right, now the masterpieces. Masterpieces are interesting because I think I liked every one of the masterpieces. So let's talk about them. So at the end of your turn, proliferate and escalate. And I explained what that did. So theoretically, as long as this card stays on the board for up to 20 turns, you're going to win no matter what. But it's also got flying, vigilance, death touch, and lifelink like the other Atraxa. And it's also the same colors. So pretty interesting card. It's 4/4 though for 14 mana, which is kind of a lot to pay, but it's pretty interesting what it can do. If you throw prevent damage on it, you're just going to be killing everything too. So that's pretty rad. Mind Splice Apparatus. Here we go. Here's like, oh, this is actually a mythic. Okay, I thought it was a masterpiece. Anyway, this is a cool card. At the beginning of your turn, this support gains oil counter 3. Then reduce the cost of each spell card in your hand by X until end of turn. X is the support's oil counter value. And what's interesting is it has flash as well. So let's talk about that. Independent of everything else, if you have a lot of spell cards in your hand, you're just going to be, after every turn, making them cost less and less by an order by an order of 3. So one card, say you have, I don't know, a 9 mana spell in your hand at the bottom of your hand, and so that first turn it's going to go down to 6. Then the next turn, if this support still has those oil counters, it's going to gain another 3. So that's going to make that 9 spell card from 6 mana cost to 0. So therefore making it free. So this card is going to be really awesome at enabling a lot of high cost spells in your hand. So I'm looking forward to being able to play with that one. I wonder if it'll be an exclusive. It's really good, I think. Decimator Web. Okay, this one is one that I think a lot of people who use Liliana the Veil are going to be chasing after, because mana field, your opponent loses 6 life and destroy the top 6 cards of your opponent's library, and you create a Phyrexian Toxin token under your opponent's control. So that second sentence is why people are going to be wanting to use it for Liliana, because as long as you have that Curse of the Veil token, you're going to be triggering it 6 times. So that's just going to be converting so much black gems or loyalty gems, and really dinging your opponent's life down. So definitely going to be a chase card for a lot of people, I think. Elish Norn, Grand Cenobite. At the beginning of your turn, your other creatures get +3/+3 for each of their reinforcements until the beginning of your next turn. Opposing creatures get -3/-3 for each of their reinforcements until the beginning of your next turn. So not only are you really buffing up your own tokens, but you're really punishing your opponent for having token creatures as well. So yeah, what a card. And it's also a 4/7 with vigilance, so it can block as well, which might be pretty useful. Especially like in a Johnny Invigorate Leadership deck that you can throw prevent damage onto. Really nice. Azuri Claw of Progress. When a creature with... It's a Phyrexian Elf Warrior. Interesting. When a creature with base power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, this creature gains oil counter 1. So, tokens. You're going to be throwing Thopters around. Construct tokens, I believe. Yeah, because it's base power. Then at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +X/+X, and X is this creature's oil counter value. So just throw a lot of cheap tokens in a deck, and then use this card to, or use that to really buff up this creature. And it seems like it's a permanent buff. So that's going to be pretty insane pretty quickly, I think. It's only a 10 mana creature as well. Hellkite Igniter. This one seems pretty cool. It's a 5/5 flyer with haste, but it is a 19 mana card to cast. But that's alright. At the beginning of your turn, if you control 3 or less artifact cards, including their reinforcements, convert 5 gems to red, which is already pretty awesome. And otherwise, deal 2 damage to any opposing target. So, yeah. I guess it'll help to not have a lot of artifact cards. Yeah. When you match 3 or more red gems, this creature gets plus X plus 0 until end of turn, and X is the number of artifacts cards you control, including their reinforcements. So you get bonuses whether or not you have artifacts in your deck or not. But I feel like it's better. I love the converting 5 gems to red. I feel like that's what you really want to use this card for. And now, Inexorable Tide. This is going to be a pretty insane card. When you cast a card, proliferate and escalate. So this is just, I mean, even without the escalate part of it, whenever you cast a card, you can proliferate. So that means you're just going to be bumping up your Vanguard support shield so quickly because it's not hard to cast a card. You can, any loop deck is going to just be casting so many cards for you. So there's that, but also escalate. And if you remember, escalating is adding toxin to your opponent. So you cast 20 cards, theoretically the game is over. You win. So that's going to be a pain to deal with, I think, for going against. If you run into a loop deck that plays this on you, it's almost certain death. So I feel like there's probably going to be a nerf involved in this card, but we'll see how it actually plays out. Maybe it's not as scary as we think it might be, but I feel like there's something about it that's going to be really scary to deal with in the right deck. This is a cool card. Jin Gitaxias Core Augur. It's a 5/4. No haste or anything. No flying. But it does have flash. And it does cost 24 mana, so that's pretty expensive. But, okay. At the beginning of your turn, draw up to 6 cards. That's already pretty cool. Because that's just going to be filling up your hand every turn, no matter what. Well, before I say that, I was going to say, you can recover from a Blade Coil Serpent, just destroying your entire hand. Too bad it doesn't give you mana, but still, just being able to get your cards back is a nice advantage. But also, at the end of your opponent's turn, your opponent discards all cards that can be discarded from their hand. Increase all your opponent's mana bonuses by 2 until the end of their next turn. But still, it's basically like reverse Blade Coil, where you are just making them discard all their cards, and then you're getting all of your cards back into your hand. So that is rad. I think the mana bonuses by 2 is kind of scary for certain people or against certain planeswalkers, but I feel like there's going to be enough to deal with that. But yeah, really cool card. I feel like it's going to be a major disruptor. Because also you may not be able to have a cheap removal spell that you can get out in time before he makes you discard your hand. So really nice. This one is interesting. Rebek, Architect of Ascension. And the most interesting part about it is that it is the second sentence here. When you cast this card, you may have it gain Leader Construct. If you don't, this creature gains Shield Counter 2. And so there are a lot of constructs in the game Thopters, for example. Anything that those little constructs that Urza Saga creates for you. So that's going to get out of control. Is going to be a creature with vigilance, so it's going to become a pretty big blocker, and it's also got ward, which is nice. And then when you cast an artifact card or use loyalty ability, artifact cards you control gain shield counter 1. So that will go well with that one blue rare that turns everything into an artifact card. So you're going to be able to give this creature a bunch of shield counters. So that's also awesome. And when you match an artifact supports gems, artifact creatures you control get +X until the beginning of your next turn. Gotta love that +X. X is the number of artifact cards you control, including their reinforcements. So, yeah, this is just going to go so well with that blue rare that gives all your creatures the artifact subtype. I'm really hoping to pull this card sometime in the near future, and yeah, it's going to be one of the more fun cards to play around with for me. Urabrask the Hidden. When a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it gains haste until the end of turn. I'm already sold, but it's also a hasty creature that's 7/4 and it only costs 10 mana. So that's pretty good right there. And then, when an opposing creature enters the battlefield or is reinforced, it gains can't attack and can't block until the beginning of your opponent's next turn. Yeah, so it's basically giving your creatures haste and kind of negating your opposing creature's haste, because it's making it not able to attack or block until their next turn. So that's rad. And I think this might be, let's see, there's still a couple left. At the beginning of your turn, increase your mana bonuses by 3 until the beginning of your next turn. So that's awesome. You don't have to already be matching a card to increase your mana bonuses there. So I love that. And this is green, so it's probably going to be doing this for your green mana bonuses. But, you put it into Brocan, and he's going to be getting so much mana per turn when you are matching gems, because this guy's on the board. Definitely going to want to put it in there. But yeah, or Tomio as well. And then when your opponent matches 3 or more gems, your opponent's mana bonus as the match color becomes 0 until the end of the next turn. So it's going to kind of negate a lot of cascading effects. Something like Liliana might be kind of cool to counter with, because of all the gem matching that she does in black, and that's going to reduce the effectiveness of that by quite a lot. So pretty cool card, and I think it's going to be kind of a difficult card to go up against. It is a 20 mana cost card, so a lot of really expensive cards, but like I said before, there are a lot of ways to get cards out on the board without paying their full mana cost. And then it's also green, so high mana cost cards aren't the scariest in mono green either. Alright. Xantcha Sleeper Agent. This creature can't attack. When this creature enters the battlefield, if your opponent controls 3 or more creatures not named Xantcha Sleeper Agent, destroy the first opposing creature, and your opponent gains control of this card. So this is a really interesting card, because it basically does a lot of things against your opponent. It's a 5/5 with bravery, and it can't attack. So if there's like some scary equipment or something that your opponent is playing, it's going to kind of render that a little bit useless, because it won't be able to attack. It can block, though, seems like. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you lose X life. X is equal to this creature's power. So that's going to be dinging your opponent for 5, at least 5 every turn. When a player activates a loyalty ability, you lose 10 life. Your opponent draws a card and it gains half its mana. That's pretty devastating. So it's going to make somebody who spams their loyalty abilities a lot, like Dakon, can be that way sometimes. So it's going to be making them lose 10 life, and it's going to be giving you a new card with half of its mana on it just for them using it. So, really interesting card. I think it's a really good card to use too. Yeah, that's going to be probably a pain to deal with. All right, so those are all the cards, and I hope you guys are as excited for it as I am. I didn't even go through everything I saw, so I feel like I'm probably missing some cards or overlooked them as far as things that you might have seen that I missed. So feel free to let me know in the comments here if you are excited about any cards I didn't spotlight here. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about the masterpieces. I feel like we haven't had chase-worthy, like this many chase-worthy masterpieces in a long time. So really excited for that. And I have a lot of jewels to spend trying to get them. All right. Until the next set comes out. See you guys.